Do you offer one?
Honest cap of the day.
Please. Thank you.
CC's Pizza is the county fair of restaurants. You go in there, you look around, you feel a little bit better about yourself, then you realize that you're in there too. Tell me I'm wrong. Well, let's be honest. You know, not everybody's made for this life. It's scary. You know, you gotta jump out of a plane while it's moving. That's not natural. It's high, it's fucking wet outside sometimes, it's snowy, it's hot, it's dry, it's shitty. Who the fuck would want to be airborne? Best job I ever had.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 110 of the Trash Talk Hour. Special guest today is retired Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, and author of Operation Pineapple Express. And today I'm joined by the Big Earl and Send It 7. Cheers, everybody.
What's up, guys? Cheers.
What's up?
All right.
Shout out to Buddy. He couldn't make it today. A little bit of a family emergency, so
It's going to be a good show.
Your kid. Yeah, it's going to be a good show. Yeah.
It's empty. The bottle's empty.
The bottle's empty. Bill, the Sergeant Major, is here with us today, and he's still driving, so I don't know what's going on with that.
But, to the safety brief people watching, there's his kids videotaping for him, so it's good.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I know. Anyhow, today I'm going to keep the conspiracy pretty short since we have an amazing guest on the show. So I'm just going to briefly go over a couple things, and then obviously we're going to throw it back to the panel to, tell us if this is true, if this occurred, or it didn't. So today we're going to talk about the Foo Fighters. So back in December 13th, 1944, General Eisenhower did a press release on the Foo Fighters. He basically talks about encounters that the British and the American pilots had during World War II. So they basically saw these flying lights in the sky, engine failure when these lights would, fly past the airplanes. And it became a serious problem of concern because they couldn't outmaneuver them. They didn't show up on radar. Eyewitness accounts. There was a big article in the New York Times about this, basically just stating that we didn't know what this was. Was it the Germans, or was it alien technology? And still to this day, nobody knows what the Foo Fighters were. They basically always showed up mainly during like bomb runs and things of that nature. And it'd be pockets of lights. I know Chris put up the pictures. I think I have a couple pictures that I sent him. And, there's a lot of stories about the UFO phenomena and stuff that I talk about often as like power plants. UFOs show up there. And a lot of times during war, even in Iraq, there's a lot of soldiers that have witnessed during the Iraqi invasion, UFOs flying over. So I don't know if it's technology from other countries. I'm a big UFO guy. So I actually believe it. And I'm going to say that these were aliens, maybe, or,
Well, you got to take a stand, Dave. You can't just say maybe.
80-20? Is that a good one, Nick?
That works, yeah. So
I don't think it was the Germans, because I don't think they had technology back then that could outmaneuver, our planes or whatever, and then not to show up on radar. I mean, obviously the technology that we have nowadays is a lot more advanced, but back then, and too many eyewitness accounts by the British, and by the Americans. So definitely Foo Fighters, 80-20 UAPs, as we call them now. Definitely 80-20. It happened. What's your take, Scott?
You know, I'm kind of there with you, but I'm going to go. I'm going to throw something out there, maybe as another angle here. When I was a young team leader, we went out to. This was just after the Civil War ended. We went out to Nellis Air Force Base to do this thing called Red Flag, and a couple of JTACs were with us, and we're really great guides. They understood the area very well, and we went out to this area called Tonopah, which is way out there. It's really by Area 51. And there's all of this, as you've seen, like this local interest in UFOs. There's even a little town, Rachel, that it is nothing but
Roswell Area 51. Yep.
Right. Watchers that come to see this. But what Tomcat and the other JTAC told us was that, back in the 80s when the UFO sightings were really high, when there was all kinds of reporting on that and stuff, it turns out that the preponderance of that was stealth technology, that it was actually stealth bombers, stealth fighters, and the Air Force kind of smartly played into that and actually drummed it up. So I'm not saying it couldn't be UFOs. I mean, the galaxy is massive, but it could have also been leading edge technology that was out there by another country or something like that.
Okay, so you're thinking maybe the Germans, because they had a huge interest. If you read up on
Germans had some of the best scientists on the planet.
And then they all came here and created NASA, right?
Well,
That's a whole different.
We brought them here. Yeah.
We brought them here. Yeah, we're gonna kill you now, or put you in front of a court, and yeah. Okay, so you're saying you're leaning what? So you're saying 50-50? What's your last take?
I'm thinking like mostly like 80%. I think it was like an advanced technology that was, that maybe
from Earth.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I like it, Scott. I appreciate you. Bill.
You know what? Scott has good points, right? So for years, for a while there, everybody thought we had UFOs that ended up being, the B-2 was being tested out in the B-1s.
Stealth bombers and all that stuff, yeah.
And he's right. I have seen some wacky stuff out doing red flag stuff. However, more stuff has been coming out where certain administrations have been released stuff saying, hey, we do have evidence of some UFOs. So I'm with Dave. I'm around the 80-20, 70-30 time frame, or not time frame, but odds, if you will. I'm with 80-20. There probably was some UFO stuff back then. I just don't think we had the technology at that point.
Right.
For the stuff that's been coming out saying that they saw it during that time. I just don't think we as in Earth didn't have that technology. So I'm with Dave on this one.
80-20. Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the sightings that occur nowadays are definitely probably, us, whatever. But then you look at the press releases that came out in June, was it last year, where we kind of released and they call them UAPs now, unidentified aerial phenomena. But last year it all came out and they said, hey, this is what's occurring in our skies.
And we
don't know what it is. Right. And nobody cared. Right. But then if you look 4 or 5 years ago, if you used to talk about it, you're crazy, man. It's bullshit. And now they're just like, literally, you can watch Fox, you can watch CNN, and they'll be talking about, things that have been seen in the sky, like the whole big incident in California, with all those pilots where that thing shot out of the water. Who knows? And I'm sure Nick's going to talk about, that Godzilla. Yeah.
No, again, I'm going to bring it up just like I did last time, is I still have to go back to my 5th grade science fair and argue with the teacher that when I did an aliens project, I got a C on it. Right. And now I was right. Okay. So take that.
Yeah.
All right. So it was a guy, actually, I forgot his name, but I mean, what kind of guy was a teacher in the 80s? Get out of here. Should have been fighting the commies. It's like, what? But it is what it is. I think that it was us. I think it was the Germans. I think it was human beings. The Germans were developing rockets back then already. They were trying all kinds of crazy shit. And who knows? Maybe that was just something that Einstein cooked up. And then just threw it up in the.
That is a good point.
Not to, if it flies.
And not to interrupt, that is a good point, Nick. Like, because all these articles that I research, it's always just talking about the Brits and the Americans, what they spotted. Like, I'm sure that at some point we caught a German who might have, said, hey, I saw this shit. There's zero saying about Germans like spotting these things. So
and in all reality, like to admit that Germans had pretty advanced aircraft technology back
They
then.
did. They did.
I have one more theory,
Mm-hmm.
and it's short, but I didn't consider, Captain America and Hydra.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good one.
Well, that's good because that kind of I mean, so too early for a segue into your book, but there's like those are things that the movies, like you see this shit in movies.
Right.
You got to get it from somewhere, right?
Like Boondock Saints is like bad television explains this. It's like you see this on bad television.
Life imitating art, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think it was the Germans. I think they were experimenting with some stuff, and who knows, maybe it was a psychological play, the first psyops operation, for the Germans of making the American bombers like scared. Nervous. Like, hey, just throw up a bunch of these freaking balls that we like have like phosphate on them and they glow, like whatever, and
Absolutely.
It'll freak them out, and then they won't want to fly.
And they were freaked out.
Yeah,
so, it did. Yeah.
I could see that. And
all right, good take, Nick.
I appreciate that. Well, yeah, I'll just jump right into the Book of Earl.
Here we go.
So, Scott, you haven't watched many of the shows, but the Book of Earl is like the Bible for veterans. I create it on a weekly basis. So it's just
what verse and chapter is this, Nick?
Yeah, we're gonna call it chapter 7, verse 4.
Okay.
Okay. Which is it's okay to cry in movies. All right. And there's only 2 movies that have ever made me cry. Okay. The first one was when Cole Trickle came back and won Daytona, right? And Days of Thunder. That was an emotional event for me. And then the second one obviously is Saving Private Ryan, right? So like that's the real one. That's the one where I actually cry. And I don't care how hard I try not to. Like when he kneels down by that tomb and he tells his wife to say that I've been a good man, like it's, you're not going to do it. Like, and so yeah. But I went with the wife to go watch Devotion the other night.
Mm-hmm.
About the pilots in the Korean War. And again, it's the forgotten war. So that's another thing I wanted to talk about. What was it? 57,000 lives lost there in 3 years. Just brutal. And the way that they did this movie, I thought was phenomenal. Where they showed you that it's not glamorous. Right. Mm-hmm. And because we all know this, we've all been in the, in operations where we lost buddies, and it's okay to let it out. It's okay to cry. And if Devotion would have went about 10 seconds longer with their sad part, I would have been done. Like I think they cut it off right at the right time where I was like, it was close. Like like the wife was already crying. Like it was close. And then after the movie, my wife goes, "Well, that sucked." And I was like, yeah, like that's the way it is, and then they make a fake little rift in there. This is what the Book of Earl is about, why it's okay to cry. And I get reminded, seeing we're talking about movies, I get reminded of Platoon, where he's talking about, what a grunt is,
mm-hmm.
right? How a grunt can take it. That's what he says. He's like, and he's writing a letter to his grandma, and he's like, "They're the best I've ever seen, Grandma," and he's like, from all ends of the United States, and now in our army today, all ends of the world, right? And it's like a grunt can take anything, right? You put us and we'll smile if you give us a hot pocket, right? When we don't have had hot food for a couple months.
Sometimes you just
say again, Bill. You kind of
need to rip it.
Yeah, you need to rip it. Like you see the smile on a grunt's face when he gets a rip it. And it's like
drink of war, man.
Yeah, the drink of war. But I did want to talk about that to the page, to Veteran Trash Talk. And again, our whole purpose is to not prevent veteran suicide, but to intervene, right? And intervention leads to prevention. And if we can get ahead of it as opposed to reacting to it, we'll be in a better place. So that's why we have the rules we have on our page, right? Our page is run by grunts, all right? And then our support group is run by all kinds of people from all different walks. Shout out to like Monica and Letha and Len and Bill helps run it. Celtic Warrior is still on there doing some stuff. He's a little crazy right now, but we got the mental health warrior Bill. He's not Bill. I lost my train of thought, but we got the mental health warrior Cliff. He's on there helping out. And again, we don't allow politics. We don't allow sexual posts, right? Like, got it. I'm glad you have those opinions, but getting back to the grunt thing is in the movie Devotion. When you watch it, they show a little bit of a glimpse of like when 6 divisions of Chinese attack. Like divisions. Right? People don't understand that watching that in the military. That's a lot of freaking people, right? Like a lot of people, and they're shooting, and you're just sitting there in a hole as a Marine, right? Trying to hold off the attack.
That's brutal, huh? Just the thought of that.
Absolutely brutal, and you think about it, and those grunts that's the reason why when we hear it, it's like, hey man, I've always had so much fun with the infantry guys. It's like, yeah. It's like we literally get so, I guess you say, desensitized to things. And it's just like we have to refine ourselves. We have to refine our emotions. We have to refine who we are. And that's one of the hardest things to do. And this page, this company, everything about it, this community, this Saturday is our therapy. Like, we get to talk with our battle buddies again. We get to bring on great guests who've done things. But so that's the Book of Earl. It's okay to cry in movies, right? And if a grunt
write this down.
Yeah. If a grunt opens up to you, you should listen. Okay. And if a grunt's sharing his feelings, you should listen. All right. Because this is somebody who, especially if he's deployed, has seen the worst of things and somehow made it funny. Right. And that's why some of you guys don't understand why we joke about everything. Right. And we always say it, there's humors after, a tragedy. It's right. This is the next step, and it's like grunts. We just find a way to deal with it. Yeah. And like, like the source from the movie Platoon, where these guys are the best I've ever seen, Grandma. They can take it. They can take anything. Right. And that's the true American spirit, and all around the world, any grunt, any infantryman in any army, right? He's doing unimaginable, unspeakable, living in crazy conditions. And so that's about it. And seeing as I was supposed to turn it over to Mike Levine, who I know is watching right now from Vet TV, is not on here because he's a retired sergeant major. You think his calendar would be up to date, but
look at Bill, man. Sergeant major, like,
yeah,
sergeant major on time.
Like, you're a sergeant major, right? Not a major.
Shit at the academy, man.
Yes. What do they teach you guys nowadays? But Bill, give us
get off my grass.
Give us something for about 2 minutes. So you got to take over Mike's spot.
Well, I'm not going to let some recruiter talk to me about fairness. Remember 80% of what we need to be at for the next fiscal year?
I can't comment, Bill. I'm still in. I got 6 months left. Just we'll have this conversation about 6 months, okay? I'll share my thoughts.
You know what, Nick? When it comes to crying in movies, I'm going to tell you the one that always gets me. I don't care how many times I've seen it. Even sometimes just seeing just a little clip of it was in Black Hawk Down when they're losing that kid's femoral artery. I don't care who you are. If you don't get teared up watching that, you're just not human, or have never been in that similar situations. But what I would talk about is a problem I'm seeing across the army, a problem I'm dealing with you actually, is resistance to change. The problem we're having in the military as a whole, I gotta be careful how I'm saying this too.
You do, CSM.
Yeah, we're seeing more and more leaders across the army. Hopefully, with the new SMA, I think that'll help change it. Because knowing the background he's come from, we're seeing senior leaders that are resistant to change because they don't want to embrace this next generation. I mean, every generation in the army is always going to talk about, hey, the next generation is softer. This generation is soft, but they're just going to be different. And this generation likes technology, whether we want to embrace that or not. That is the way of the world. And if we don't start looking forward as ways to reach these kids, we're gonna fail. And you see it more with the VR headsets. I sat in a brief last night. Now they're talking about doing VR maintenance type stuff. And half the room was all about it, and half the room was kind of against it. And we have to understand that this next generation, guess what? VR is where it's going, and it's only going to get more and more in depth and crazier than we ever thought we would see. I mean, we grew up in the Mario generation where I remember when it came out, it was amazing. And now I'm Lamar Jackson in a virtual headset, throwing footballs in games. And so again, leaders just have to understand that times are changing, including us. We're just getting older, and if we don't start embracing this new technology and change in our formations, the Army will keep going by.
They made us talk about it.
Why can't we just normalize change? Like, it's okay. Times change.
Because we're trying to normalize things that are weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
That's a whole different rabbit hole we go down there. It's like we're trying to normalize things that don't matter, and that's part of it with the grunt as well. And we've talked about this before with the ponytails and the beards and the fingernails and the transgenders or whatever. And I was like, if you go on Twitter and you go on Facebook, you don't see grunts complaining about this stuff.
Nope.
Right?
Well,
one, the grunts probably aren't on Twitter, and then
they don't know how to operate Twitter.
but they're sitting here like, if you ask any grunt that's Ranger tabbed or Jump Master, Airborne, or Special Forces guy, if you ask them what they think about ponytails, I guarantee you 99% of them go, what? Like, what? Who cares? Like, if a girl wants a ponytail, let her wear a ponytail. Like, that's what a grunt would say. I don't give a shit.
Most of the people wearing a grunt style shirt with tattoos and complaining about ponytails is also the kid that's scoring a 200 on the APFT or a 400 on the ACFT, bitching about how hard the Army needs to be.
Yep.
It's always that guy. It's always the guy that's passing the PT test that's doing all the talking about this stuff too.
Yep. That's why you need to go out and buy Gruntworks and support us.
Yeah, we're actually owned by grunts. All right. But anyways, yeah. So again, that's what I mean, I understand it because I have common sense, but it's just weird how people don't want to adapt. They refuse, and there's so many studies behind it now, with leadership doctrine and all this, to where it's becoming, and I hate the phrase people first, right? I just can't stand it. I think it should be people centric, right? Because people first is not what the Army's about, and it never will be about that.
The problem with people first is people didn't understand that it's being marketed at different levels. So when General McConville talks about people first, he's trying to market it to the entire Army. But when battalions and brigades tried to talk people first, it got down to the battalion level that people first meant I let you go home at 2 every day, and not hey, people first is I'm going to make sure you're ready for combat.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I said. So when you try to message something, and I always bring up the guy who created the word genocide, right? He's like, I have to create a word that means nothing else. It means this.
Yeah.
Done. And so it's interesting. But hey, let's get to our guest. He's been patiently waiting.
Cheers.
And so when I spend hours on the script, which is about 5 seconds on my phone, I can real easily make fun of somebody without knowing them. But it was hard for me because I read Scott's book before I wrote the script. There it is, Operation Pineapple Express, and I mean the book is freaking phenomenal, right? And the reason I kind of changed it to a movie thing for the Book of Earl was, again, this is the stuff that you see in movies, right? It's not supposed to happen like this. It's not supposed to be this, right? This is wild, okay? And I made a joke on the script where I said that, Scott was jealous of the Navy SEALs, always getting movie deals, and he's like, hey, where's ours? So he's sticking up for the Green Berets, and so now he runs the play so that everybody could be a Special Forces guy and all that stuff. But No, it's something that, you know, we took a hold of right away with the Afghanistan withdrawal here on Veteran Trash Talk. And, you know, Buddy had a real good honesty cap about it, where, you know, he talked about, it's like, hey, look, man, be upset about it. That's fine. You know, and he's like, you know, reach out and talk, but it's like, you got to stay composed when we got to talk to each other. We got to get it out. And there's a line in the book from Scott, and we'll get into it, but he talks about demons. And it hit me right away because that's our signature saying on Veteran Trash Talk, which is
get the demons out.
Right? Like, you're not going to be, it's the colonel that you referenced in the book that actually didn't take his high 3 as a full bird and got retired as a lieutenant colonel. Like you just said, I'm done, you know, and it's, it's like you deal with those demons. You can't beat them by yourself. All right. Just can't. But they are still your responsibility, right? They're your demons. Get them out. All right. Get them out so that we can talk about it. But I know, I'm sure Scott will talk about it, but I'm just going to guess that writing this book also helped him defeat some demons of his own, and then get them out there, because when you read it, you're going to see some demons in there. And, you know, if you've ever operated, whether it's special operations, infantry, or just, you know, been in the shit, right? Some of this stuff's going to resonate pretty hard with you. And the story about, you know, you're a special forces guy in there from the Afghan Special Forces is amazing. So Scott, welcome to the Dumpster Fire. Tell us why you decided to compete with the Navy SEALs with writing books and making movies and doing plays. But other than that, just like give us a little bit of background on your service, and obviously let's sell the book, because this is the great book. So welcome, Scott.
Thanks, Nick. And it's good to be with all you guys. I really love what you're doing, and the fact that you're running at this whole thing with the baseball, man. Like that's I believe the same thing. And so I'm honored to be here. I don't know that I could ever compete with the Navy SEALs in that category. You know, I do operate in the public space, you know, and that has been a pretty big transition for me since I retired 10 years ago, because, you know, in the special ops world, it at least when you're in, you know, it's low key, it's pretty low key. And you spend your time either in a place like Afghanistan or getting ready to go back, just like you guys did. I did not intend to write this book. I did not intend to have anything to do with the U.S. government, the U.S. Army, Afghanistan, or any of those things ever again, other than my play that I was doing as a nonprofit, as part of my nonprofit. And what I mean by that is, you know, I retired out of Army Special Forces in 2013. I'd spent about 23 years in the Army, about 18 of that as a Green Beret. I will tell you that I wanted to be a Green Beret from the time I was 14. I met a Green Beret in my soda shop when I was a little kid in Mount Ida, Arkansas. And like that dude, the minute I saw him, I knew that's what I wanted to do. He just, the way he carried himself, it was just, and I didn't even really know what Green Berets did at that time, but I just knew that was my way out of that town. It was what I wanted to do. And it never changed for me. Like, it never changed. I think I probably recycled Ranger School and the Q course so many times I could have PCS to both of them. But it
typical officer in Ranger School, so it's all right.
What?
Typical officer in Ranger School. You guys.
Yeah, not only was I no, it gets better, bro. I was a quartermaster second lieutenant. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Oh yeah.
You were in charge of the laundry machines.
Woo! Yeah. But it didn't matter, because I knew that's what I was going to do, and I was just going to stay in it until I got it, and it eventually happened, and I loved it. I loved my entire time in SF, and you know, losing a lot of friends, time away from my family, and all of that stuff that went with it. I would not change a thing. I loved every second of it. But it got to a point, I think, like we were talking about before the show started, for me, and my dad always said, you know, he's my hero. He said, you'll know when it's time. And I did. I knew it was time to leave. It was 2013. I'd been selected for a command, but we had walked away from our Afghan partners in the villages with the Village Stability Program. And a lot of my friends were murdered. Frankly, I looked at the careerism in the Army officer ranks at 06 and above, and I just said, that's just not for me. So I hung it up. And I was done. I had moved on with my life, was really doing a lot of nonprofit work around veteran storytelling and our play Last Out. And that's where I was kind of in that restoration world when this whole thing in 2021, happened. And I think like a lot of guys, I just kind of got sucked back into it, man. Like, it was my friend Nizam, an Afghan commando who just basically was a dead man walking. And a lot of us are alive because of guys like him and others. And it was just, to me, unacceptable that he was going to be executed because we just quit on him. And so I'd love to tell you it was some kind of like preconceived thing, but honestly, the whole Pineapple experience and all of that, it was a gutting, terrible experience. It still is. And I wish it had never happened.
Yeah, and we appreciate you sharing that with that emotion involved, because again, those of you watching, man, this is. I didn't spend much time in Afghanistan, and I was never special operations. But when I was reading about, and this is coming from who was the young? I mean, you obviously had Petraeus with counterinsurgency, but who was the young SF guy that came up with the idea to like get into like the villages again?
So there was a couple people, General Scott Miller was the, as far as I'm concerned, at the senior leader level, was the guy that was really, responsible for that. I was one of the architects of the program. Right. So I had the opportunity to see it from the ground up through implementation and then through abandonment. And honestly, Nick, it was a microcosm and almost like a futurist look at what was going to happen with the House of Cards in August 2021. We abandoned the villages the exact same way. It was the catalyst for me getting out, man. I couldn't stand it. It was more than I could stomach.
And then your play is lastout.org, right?
Yeah. So the play is if you go to lastoutplay.com, what I tell people is, if you want to know why Operation Pineapple Express and these other things happened, these other volunteer groups, come see this play, because it's Last Out, Elegy of a Green Beret. But honestly, anybody that conducted ground combat in either Iraq or Afghanistan or even Vietnam is going to connect with this play, because one, it's all combat veterans in the cast who train diligently as actors. So it's not like an after school special, like, oh, look at the cute right. doing a play. We train really seriously and have, New York coaches and everything. So, but the other thing is that it follows I wanted to write a play, and I had never written a play or anything like that. But I wanted to write something that covered the life of a post 9/11 NCO. And even though I'm an officer, I was raised by NCOs. I'm alive because of NCOs. And I wanted to tell the story of an NCO and his family in this long war, and so,
you didn't even know he had a family until what, like 2000, like this year, 2 years ago, last year, right?
Right. Well, so when I wrote the play, I based it on 3 team sergeants that I had that didn't make it home, and rolled them into one composite character, and then just started. And I actually wrote the play to kind of heal myself. It was a project that one of my mentors had suggested on the storytelling front. I never intended it to see the light of day. And I did one little scene of it at a community theater thing as I was working on my public speaking, and the place just really fell apart because of the emotion in it, like you were talking about. And there were a lot of veterans in the audience that really connected to it. And they all came up to me afterward and they were like, dude, that's a play. You got to do that. And I'm like, yeah, but I've never acted before, and I'm 50. And, so to complete my midlife crisis, I started studying, acting and stuff up in New York. But we put this thing on the road. We toured 16 cities before Pineapple, before the collapse in Afghanistan, 28,000 miles in a U-Haul van across the country, performing this play about this Green Beret team sergeant who's killed in the very first scene. He's blown up in the very first scene, and he's trying to ascend to the warrior resting place of Valhalla, but he can't let go. He's holding on to something. So his buddies come down from Valhalla, including his best friend who was killed in the Pentagon. that are called operators, and they're like shapeshifters, and they come back and they become all the people in Danny Patton's life who made his heart pump the most blood: his wife, his son, his arch nemesis, Colonel Smith, his a Taliban commander. And so you go through Danny's entire life, like his career, like selection, getting married, 9/11, deployment after deployment. And the play just bounces between his living room and his firebase. And so by the end of the play, you don't know, Danny doesn't know which one he's in, and you don't either. And it's his journey to figure out what he's holding on to so he can let go. And it is a 2-hour cathartic ride, man. And so I would say, Nick, I would add a third event that you will cry at, and it's Last Out.
Yeah. And again, I'm okay with that now. So like, I don't try to pinch myself to stop anymore, but, and like Bill was right, especially with that scene in Black Hawk Down. I usually leave the room knowing that scene's coming up. So, it's like, it's a tough one, but, I wanted to bring up
guys, but what you guys did I was just going to say, but what you guys did for a living was tough. And what we experienced in the loss of our friends was tough. And what our families went through was tough, and my thing, this is why I wrote the play, is that civilians for the most part don't understand that. And a lot of veterans are asking themselves, like, what was the point?
Right.
Particularly on the heels of the Afghanistan abandonment. And so this play is a way to tell all of them that it mattered, and to let them see their life play out up on that stage in a safe environment where they can find meaning in it. And if they need to have an emotional access to it, they can, and know that we love them and they're still going to be all right, and that it mattered,
Yeah. And Scott, real quick, I know Nick had a question, but just in regards to the play for all of our viewers right now, like, do you have a timeline where this play? I know you and I spoke, before the show, where the next.
They're going to Phoenix, baby.
Yeah. Is there any other states you guys are gonna be covering? How did they go to this play? Like,
yeah, well, the coolest thing was we were all grassroots, man. We did it all ourselves as a 501c3 nonprofit, and then Gary Sinise saw it and said, "Hey, man, let's make this thing a real production." So his foundation is now producing it, and we just performed a preview in Tampa. We're going to DC at Catholic University January 6th through the 8th for one more preview, and then we're actually kicking this thing off like big time at the theater that Gary Sinise founded in Chicago called Steppenwolf.
Chicago.
Wow.
January.
Be careful.
Yeah, January 20 through 22.
I'm from Wisconsin originally, so I gotta hate it already.
Yeah.
But then if you go to lastoutplay.com or scottmann.com, that all of our tour stops, I think we've got them listed there now.
Good. And we'll post it on the page too, because
we got a lot of comments in the chat. Going back to the conspiracy, one guy says that Schultz says that the Foo Fighters were real, for sure. But then we got Jeff Creighton, good friend of ours, who's still on the recovery process. He's a cop.
Shout out to Creighton, man.
Yeah, Creighton's on here. He got hit by a drunk driver as a cop.
On duty, right?
On duty, and almost died. And he was a Marine, and then switched over to the 82nd. But hey, hope that I love your videos, Jeff. That you on that recovery is just an awesome.
Talk about motivation right there.
Yeah. But no, so I did. He said that just listening to the brief of this play is like, I gotta go watch it. Well, Jeff, come to Phoenix. I'll pay for it, man. Let's go.
Let's do it.
I know you can afford it, but we'll just come out, hang out with me. We'll fly out to Phoenix, go watch it when Scott comes. And hey, if Gary Sinise wants to, produce our show, we won't get upset about that either. When you talked about counterinsurgency and how you develop relationships, especially as a Green Beret, when we first deployed together, Dave and I, and then Joe, I was an E4. Mm-hmm. So and it was a very kinetic environment. And I actually got to have a lot of fun, right? Because I wasn't responsible for anybody, right? I just got to gun a 50 cal, right? And I got to, hey, shoot over there, roger that, let's go. But when you talk about counterinsurgency, and you say it in your book, it's like counterinsurgency does involve bullets, and however, you're never going to win a war in today's generations of any country if you unless you show who Americans actually are, what we actually stand for, what we actually do. And I think the reason they sent the 82nd to Samara after that whole incident with the 101st, it was, you got to be able not to shoot sometimes.
Yeah.
When you're fully authorized to shoot. And the
101st fucked that place up.
Yeah, but again, I can see where their mentality was, and it was like
because Samara was not a safe place either.
Yeah, right. And so it's like you get shot at all day, every day. You don't know, you're in an urban environment. You don't know where it's coming from, and Al Qaeda wasn't like other groups. Al Qaeda would shoot at you from a congested place, hoping that you smacked all these people.
Yeah,
like that's exactly what they were waiting for. Now, me as a young E4, however, I came in later in the Army. I came when I was 23 years old. It's like I got that right away. I understood that it was like, if I shoot right now and I kill 20 civilians, it might not do anything to us, might not hurt us. In fact, it might save a couple of our lives. But the people I just killed, right? Maybe they got 3 cousins into crit. All right. Maybe
I think, Nick, you and I were very cognizant of that all the time. Even like when we had soldiers, it would act, act a certain way towards the civilians. Like, hey, fuck face. Like, why? Why are you being a fucking asshole? Why are you being a
jackass to them?
Like, we're going to drive through here again tomorrow and you being an asshole, it costs one of our lives,
Right.
So yeah. I think we were really good about that. I'm not going to name any names, but
then again, we had a tremendous command team.
Like great leadership and everything.
We had, who's now Colonel Ferris. He was Captain Ferris.
Yeah.
And we had, First Sergeant Perez.
General Wong.
Yep. General Wong was the battalion commander. And it was like, they taught us that, hey, understand that it's a system. It's complex.
Yeah.
If you screw this up, you might not you might not get hurt by it, but you might have 2 other villages go nuts in someone else's AO. Right.
In my opinion, it's also just being a human being, man.
Right. So
I don't think
exactly.
But nobody needed to teach me how to treat other people.
But for those of you who think that counterinsurgency doesn't involve fighting and it just means handing out soccer balls, Scott, talk a little bit about that with how those relationships were built, and for the person watching right now that doesn't understand why people were upset about that Afghanistan withdrawal, obviously we know why. But talk about those relationships and what was built.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I always try to break it down is that if you think back to 9/11, the worst terror attack in our nation's history, and what mobilized many of us to get involved in this thing, my Ranger buddy was killed on 9/11 in the Pentagon. Cliff Patterson. He was, he never had a chance on that day, and from that point on, like for the very, the first couple of years. In the war, like you guys were talking about, I was focused on retribution. I was focused on payback, scalps on the barn, and I got it in spades, man, just like a lot of us. But what I came to realize, getting back to my Green Beret roots, as spending several tours in Afghanistan, was when you think about violent extremism, groups like ISIS, Al Qaeda, what they do is they set up shop in these undergoverned, at-risk places like Iraq, Afghanistan. And they immerse themselves in a population that is dilapidated, that is having trouble governing itself. And they basically exploit that local population to get a level of autonomy that allows them to plan.
Well, that's a big word.
Yeah. They can do whatever the fuck they want, and they can plan, train,
there we go.
Project.
Talking to a bunch of you got to use smaller words.
We have a rule on veteran trash talk. You can't use words you can't spell, but I think you can spell that. So we would.
I'm sure Scott can. Yeah.
But that's what happened on 9/11. Is there was a safe haven in Afghanistan where these guys were able to do whatever they wanted, and they did it from these rural populations, man. So, when we went into those places in Iraq and Afghanistan, the only true antibody to like putting down Al Qaeda, putting down ISIS, in my assessment of years of work in that problem, is locals, local Afghans, local Iraqis, local commandos, local Afghan special forces, Kas Tejas, they're the ones that have the staying power. They have the ability to get in there and root them out. And that's really where things were going in Afghanistan. I mean, you talked about these relationships. The Afghan commandos, for example, that were started in 2008, were doing basically 98% of the fighting by the end of the Afghan war. They had lost hundreds, if not thousands of people. I think the Afghan army lost something like 66,000 people in the
Jesus.
You know, and the Afghan commandos and the special forces were, by the end of the war, were doing all the fighting. If you watch this movie Retrograde that's coming out on Nat Geo, you'll get a real good sense of just what a load those guys were carrying. And, you know, really, I think, Nick, you worked with the first group and the commandos a little bit. You saw how good those guys are.
Like, I was gonna ask that question because both of you have been to Afghanistan. I did my 27 months in Iraq, and we dealt a lot with the Iraqi army. And like, are they semi-comparable? Or I mean, the way you're talking about, Scott, what you know, these commandos did in Afghanistan.
The ANA are like the national police in Iraq.
Okay,
right? Like they
not great.
Because I was at no point ever. I was very, you know, fascinated with our Terps interpreters and stuff. We had some really, really good guys. Shout out to, you know.
Well, remember when 10th Group brought down their guys that they were training when our IP station got blown up and it killed like 40 IPs?
Yep.
Right? Like they brought down the Iraqi army guys, their special forces guys, you know, and you see what Green Berets, like in the book says, are supposed to do.
Yep.
Right? Like not kick down doors.
No, that's not even I had a Green Beret colonel one time wrote a great op-ed. He was talking about, he went to see his doctor, and the doctor was razzing him about, you know, the SEALs killing bin Laden. And, you know, didn't he feel ashamed that the SEALs got him instead of the Green Berets? And our general was mad about that. But he said the reason he was mad is that the doctor didn't realize that was never a Green Berets job in the first place. That's not what they do. And, you know, our job has always been relationships and building these partner forces so that, you know, they can hold ground. They can do this over the long haul, and we can get our guys out of there. And that was honestly where things were moving in Afghanistan. I mean, there was not only broader Afghan army, they weren't that great, but the Afghan Special Operations Command and the associated forces, man, they were good. And they were well trained, and they were getting after it. And we literally walked away from them. I mean, I interviewed General Sami Sadat, who was an Afghan special ops commander fighting in Helmand province. And I think it was in June of 2021, his air wing commander walks into him. But remember now, at this point, all the Green Berets are out of country. They're gone. There's no advisory support at all. The commandos are fighting on their own. And Sammy and his guys are holding Helmand the best they can. His air wing commander walks in and says, "Sir, we can't fly today." And he's like, "Why not?" He goes, "All the contractors are gone. They've all gone." And without any warning, without any heads up, our entire contractor fleet left Afghanistan, and every airframe in the inventory was grounded within hours. And
you've put so much effort into building them up. Like, you got our support, and then just like that.
Yeah. And you know, just like you guys, you know, because this isn't unique to Green Berets. I mean, even when you guys were operating in Iraq, you were doing counterinsurgency. Yes.
Oh yeah.
You're gunning up and getting after it, but you were working by, with, and through indigenous people, you know, and that's what we all did. It's what we gave our youth for, right? We traded our youth for a capacity to exist in those two countries so that we didn't get hit like that again, you know. And the problem with that, the way Afghanistan ended, was, to me, everything that we were taught and told and held accountable for was completely abandoned within 24 hours, you know. And it created, in my assessment, a moral injury on our veteran population that we don't even understand right now. Like,
we can't even study it yet.
No, but
the effects won't be for another 5-10 years. Yeah.
I've lost 3 friends to suicide from the Afghanistan conflict, and I think we're on the front end of a tsunami right now. I really do.
Yep.
We're on the front end of something that we don't even understand, and I'm not sure our leaders, our senior leaders, get it.
Well, one, they don't.
Yeah, my
care.
dad, my
They
dad
don't-
read
they
the
don't
book
care.
too. My dad read the book too, and he was like, "Yeah, tell Scott I loved it, and tell him that I like how he took a very hard stance on how fucked up that situation was, you know, and that he's expressing his opinion and his feelings."
Well, then
because,
again, it's objective
it's-
too.
I try
Yeah.
to be. I really, I
Yeah.
appreciate.
No, the book is 100% objective.
it is, but you can pull it out of there from, you know, like
Well, what I tried to do, guys, on this was,
No, I'm saying it's objective's a good
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and when
Yeah.
I decided to write the book, I'm in Kentucky with my mom and dad right now, and one of the things that was really hard for me was I thought, you know, if I write this book the way it happened, and I tell the story through the lens of the Afghans who risked everything and their veteran partners who stood at their shoulder, it is going to reveal things about our senior leadership, things about our institutional leaders that pretty much every mentor I've ever had is going to walk away from me. And that is exactly what happened. I mean, that is exactly what happened. But writing it in the third person where I'm just a character in the book versus this one time at band camp, here's what I did.
Yeah, I was calling you The Rock when I was reading it. The Rock says.
No, I was just a storyteller, man. And
Yeah.
honestly, my role in this thing was, you know, kind of a head cheerleader for a lot of really, really talented people that did some amazing things. And then just getting to tell their story. Honestly, that was my role in this thing. But in doing so at the end, Dave, what I did decide was, yes, I'm going to tell this story in the third person. I'm going to try to keep it really apolitical and just play it down the middle and just tell it from the street level, the grunt level. But when I get to the epilogue, I'm going to have my say, you know, because I felt like if we were going to do what we did and, you know, cash in our pension funds and our savings accounts to keep our brothers alive and step into the arena, then we rated the opportunity at the end to speak our piece.
Damn right.
And that's what that epilogue was. I felt like the epilogue
That was phenomenal.
I interviewed dozens, man, of not just Green Berets, but guys from, you know, I went and met with the 82nd, you know, the White Devils, who frankly, holy crap, man, what those guys did at that 4-foot hole in the wall, it is the stuff of legend. And, you know, there were no Green Berets on the ground, man. There were no SF teams on the ground. It was White Devils from the 82nd that were pulling the vetted Afghans that we were pushing up to the fence over phones. They were the ones pulling them through. But my point is, in interviewing all
the red sunglasses.
Captain Red Sunglasses.
Captain Red Sunglasses. Pineapple. Go find Captain Red Sunglasses.
And Jesse, his first sergeant, who I thought was just Jesse Kennedy, one of the most amazing guys. But at the end of the day, man, my damn dog.
It's okay.
All good. All good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So while he's yelling at his dog right now, shut that damn dog up, like Tombstone. But no, yeah. Go ahead, keep going.
What I was just going to finish on is what all of them said consistently was, where were the generals, man? You know, like where was the senior leadership on this thing? Where were the diplomats? Where were the senior politicians, you know, stepping in for us and taking a stand for us? And I think that was the thing that was hardest for these guys. And in the epilogue, you know, having to talk about that was super uncomfortable, frankly, because a lot of those guys are my mentors. And, you know, all of us bear responsibility for what happened in this war. But, you know, that's just a question that remains unanswered. And I think there's got to be accountability here, man. There just has
100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you brought up NCOs earlier with your play. And, you know, Buddy and I have talked about this all the time. We specifically talk about the fifth principle. I'm sure Bill will chime in on it because Bill has some extensive time in Afghanistan as well with Green Berets. But I always try to tell people, I go, stop yelling at, you know, people above the rank of full bird for like things that don't really matter, right, to them, because they don't care about them. Like, they're not supposed to care about them. They're supposed to be looking up and out of the formation, not down and in. Right. I go, that's the NCO's job. So when you start talking about bases like Fort Hood or whatever, it's like with, you know, Vanessa Guillen or, you know, whatever is going on. No. Where's the sergeant at? That's who I want to talk to. I want to find out why that person didn't know. Now, what you're talking about is 100% strategic. It's 100% who was responsible, right? And so, yes, like, where are you?
Yeah.
Right. And how political are you going to be? Now, we have inside information. I'm not going to say the name. Obviously, you'll know who I'm talking about, but he kind of worked with General Mathis when he was the Secretary of Defense. Right. And, you know, Bill knows this story. So it's like,
yeah,
like,
I do too. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you're supposed to, when you don't agree with what the politicians are doing as a senior leader in the military, you're supposed to resign.
That's right.
Right. And that tells everybody that, hey, look, you know, I'm not going to unnecessarily put troops at risk.
Yep.
Like, I'm going to resign. And like, that's what a leader does.
But to that point, you know, and I raised this point, and I actually got a phone call, and I'll do the same. I'm just going to keep it anonymous, but I got a phone call from the public affairs officer of a very, very senior person in the Pentagon, who basically was saying to me, Scott, what kind of country would we live in if every time one of our senior officers disagreed with a politician that they resigned? That's what was asked of me. And I said,
a good one.
I'd like to live in a country where a senior officer resigns whenever we break a promise to a partner, you know, to an ally, you know, because that is, when I look at all of the senior NCOs and junior officers who took a stand and risked their careers in this abandonment, this wholesale abandonment, I believe, and based on my conversations with them, they had fought this entire war. They had lost their friends. They had lost their youth for the simple reason that they knew that the reason we were attacked in the first place was because we lacked sufficient viable intelligence capability on the ground, and we did not have a good partner capability to stand against that threat. And they said, never again. And they gave everything to it over and over again. They didn't go one time, two times. They went, like Dave, 27 months in Iraq, or Bill, God knows how many rotations with 7th Group, you know, and same with you, Nick. And this is not unusual. This was our entire combat population did this. And when they saw what happened in Afghanistan and this abandonment, they saw the complete erosion of everything that had been built. And they saw that this magnificent capability that had been built over time was literally just going to go into like desert sand. It was just going to blow away, you know? And so they jumped into the breach and they tried to hold it for as long as they could for responsible institutional leaders to come and take it. And they never did. They never came. And right now, I will tell you, there are still groups like Moral Compass, Pineapple, Sacred Promise, who are still on the phone with these Afghans, paying for safe houses, paying for babies to be born, moving families from Pakistan to Afghanistan, doing food drops, right? Because they cannot hang up the phone, because they know if they do, that these commandos and these special forces and their families are going to be executed, you know. And to do that to our, to do that to these people who gave us everything they had, and then to put that on their shoulders and pretend like none of this ever happened. I will never understand it. I don't care what excuses I get from the bureaucrats and the senior officers on this. There is nothing that can justify placing this burden on our veteran population. And there never will be. You know,
yeah, we gotta let Bill chat a little bit here. He's been on mute for a while. I know he's steaming a little bit of the thing, and I just, you know, we have I don't know if you know who JC
Bill probably can't comment too much on this,
but you know,
I'll comment.
Yeah, but you know, JC Glick, he's lost 8 of his Rangers to suicide in the last couple of years. You know, and like you said, if we don't, this is another thing. We got to intervene, guys. We got to get ahead of it. We got to call your buddies. We got to, you know, get them on Veteran Trash Talk, get them to the play, you know, Pineapple Express, the last out play, get them there. So yeah, Bill, I see you chomping at the bit there. So getting angry. If you need anybody in your play to like represent a big, tall Russian like Drago, that's Bill. He's like 6'6", like he's a monster. So yeah.
Yeah, man, where do I begin? So
lot of people don't understand, and Dave, the hit on the question you asked earlier is how hard some of these ANSOC and Quitejas guys fought over there. And when we had Scott, we had another seventh group good friend of mine who also wrote a book, Tip of the Spear, Ryan Henderson. I mean, we
shout out to Ryan, man. Yeah,
he's in Ukraine right now, blowing up bombs.
I mean, like the dude doesn't stop either.
Yeah.
Like,
the question I got for you in a couple of seconds, Scott, is we talked about when we lost Abe and Bismillah. A lot of people don't understand that these guys fought their asses off with us, and like Abe, gave their lives, and we just walked away. And there's a bunch of Quitejas guys I think about, and even though I'm surprised it took him that long to get assassinated, the General Rozics were out there just running and gunning the whole time we're over there, and for us to just walk away, it hurt. And and I've also lost some seventh group brothers to suicide. And Andy was part of the White Devils crew, and a lot of people think it was actually that deployment that did the most damage to him mentally, and it wasn't necessarily the some of the seventh group ones. And I people ask me all the time how I felt about it. I can't explain it. It's actually gotten a little worse for me now. I just got a brand new lieutenant who grew up in Kabul. She was actually a major in the A&P.
Wow.
Now she's over here. And it's interesting to talk to her, getting her views on it. Obviously, you can imagine her views. And I don't have words to explain to people of what that did to the veterans, like we're talking about, and think about all the people that I know there that we just left. And listen, when we left, all those dudes knew what was going to happen.
Oh yeah, it was clear as day.
I mean, we all knew what was going to. They were about to get steamrolled. I can't believe it happened that fast necessarily, but we all knew it was coming. And the question I have for you, Scott, I'm really close with Ryan, really great friend of mine. Chewed a lot of the same dirt together.
You may try to kill him.
I did try to kill him.
He did drop a bomb on top of him, right?
Yeah.
The soft world is, a very silent world, not like the SEALs. The GBs have a different mindset. But I know when Ryan released his book, we talked, he started getting a lot of hate from the community for just writing a book. Were you seeing any of that hate yourself?
That's a great question, Bill. And I appreciate all that you've done, man. And please tell Ryan hello from me. I'm super proud of him. And, I want to come back to another point you made. I won't do it right now. I want to answer your question directly, but I do want to come back to, if we could, guys, what Bill talked about.
Floor's yours, brother.
And what we're characterizing as moral injury, because I think what you guys are doing is going to help a lot with it. And I want to call it out just a little bit as a named thing. But before that, I'll go to your question, Bill, on, and I did get some, but I'll tell you, man, like when I decided to enter the public space, the reason I did it was when ISIS was coming to the forefront in 2014. And I was looking at a lot of these talking heads that were talking about ISIS, and they were completely wrong. Like they were not saying what our guys were going through. They weren't talking accurately about who ISIS was and what they were about. And our guys didn't really have a voice. Certainly the SF community didn't have a voice in the public space. And I wanted to try to do that. And then after I got into the nonprofit world and realized that one of the biggest deficits that we have in our civil society is that we don't help our veterans transition home through storytelling. Every society on the planet uses storytelling. It's what you guys do. Storytelling, It heals the brain, it heals the soul, and it allows us to bridge that civil military gap. And I was in a closet with a 45, man, and it brought me out and saved my life. And so I really fell in love with this thing called storytelling and built a nonprofit around it. But I never got any flack for that. I didn't even really get any flack for the play. I mean, SF, NCOs, we did it at Bragg, and like third group was there, SWIC. I mean, and it was almost entirely operators. And when the play was over, we were just sitting there breathing together. It was the most cathartic thing I've ever seen. And everybody was with me. The book, the only flack I got on it was really from senior leadership, because they felt like,
you're calling them out.
Yeah. I mean, how dare you? And the deal, man, like in the soft world, there is this tribalism, like, this geo, that geo, and they've got their little tribe and faction, and you're this, and if you're affiliated with that crap, then, you don't do that. You don't, no matter what this general does or this admiral, you don't talk about it publicly. But to me, it's like, wait a minute, if these guys I've been in the public sector for 10 years teaching corporate America. If any of these guys were CEOs, they'd have been fired long ago. And what they, and their actions would have been on public display for consideration. And to me, it's like, we need to do this. We need
to be in jail.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And we
promise you this money. Hey guys, yeah. I guess it's comparable, Nick. Yeah, for sure.
We need to talk about what happened in a way of accountability, if nothing else. And now I'll swing it back. But I think the reason that some of the guys feel that flack is whenever, for some reason, I don't know why it is, but if you write your memoirs or something in the first person, Special Forces has a tendency to eat its own. And I don't know why that is. I don't know why.
The NCO Corps in general.
Yeah, I don't know why we don't celebrate the stories that we tell, particularly if they're told authentically and honestly, as a way to learn and celebrate our journey. To me, I'm all for it, man. I think it's great. And whether it's, Jocko or Tim Kennedy, I don't really care. I just want to know their story. I think it's awesome. And Jim Gant, is another one. He was decimated. So I did not experience it that bad, Bill. But I think maybe it's because I wrote the book in third person. And I just interviewed a ton of NCOs along the way, and most of them were the characters in the book. Most of the guys that are characters in my book are renegades. They're kind of guys that went against the grain anyway.
Yeah, I was gonna hit on that. Well, go ahead, Nick. I mean, whatever.
Yeah, I was gonna just bring up veteran trash talk again, and what we're here for, and what also like something like that Bill signed up for, and we became good friends over it. Is Ryan telling his story when he came on the show, and he's been on multiple podcasts, and he's been on Jocko. I mean, that was his therapy.
Yeah.
And you're gonna hate on him for it.
It's ridiculous.
Right. It's like, you're so dumb.
Yeah.
Right. I don't care who you are. If you're gonna come at and we deal with people like this on Veteran Trash Talk, where it's like
all the time.
Who do you fucking think you are, or what have you done?
Yeah.
Because what Ryan's been through, there's people that have been through worse than Ryan, but what Ryan's been through, he actually had the courage to talk about it.
Yeah.
He actually had the courage to put it on paper.
Yeah.
And he helped save lives with that book.
Yep.
Right. And it's like, and you're going to hate on him for it. Like, I got nothing for you.
Yeah.
Like Scott said, we just got to promote. We got to promote talking about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the best therapy for me. Like we always say on Saturdays we get on here, but if you keep it fogged inside of you, and then it just becomes harder and harder and harder. Like my therapy.
Look, we joke about one of the hardest days of Bill's life.
Exactly.
We joke about it. We're like, Bill, you got to try to kill Ryan with a 500 pounder.
But it's not. It's not cool to talk about it. It's I just gotta keep. I'm gonna be a man and just keep it in me, and and that's when the situations occur, man.
It's killing us at an epidemic level.
100%, spot on, Scott.
No, what did you say, Bill? Before you didn't really come through.
Go ahead, Bill.
And
still that.
But yeah,
we didn't catch that part, Bill.
I said I didn't try to kill Ryan. Keaton tried to kill Ryan, so you can't blame me. Even when Ryan came out here and did the book signing with Trox, I remember him texting me. He's like, "Hey, do you mind coming?" Because I always have people that show up and just say I'm lying in my book, and I talked about it again. Like, I don't know why. I mean, we just talked about is why we try to eat ourselves all the time.
Terrible.
Like, as soon as we see a success or writing a book, it's, hey, we got to instantly attack this guy and say he's lying about everything. And it's just, I don't know why we do it.
Well, we talked about that, I think 2 episodes ago, Nick and I, just with the veteran community and the veterans that have started businesses and everything.
Yeah.
How they hate on each other.
Yeah.
Like,
It's
dude,
like,
you want to promote everybody. Like, You sell shirts, come on our show, we'll promote you for free.
Yeah, so Scott, we're a for-profit company.
The goal is that we're all successful. Why do we have to go against each other? Let's do this all together, and then let's be successful together.
We got people that they'll message us and be like, "Hey, can we come on our show? We're an apparel company." We're like, "Yeah,
come on."
But you're an apparel company. It's like, "Yeah,
you sell shirts too."
Okay, I hope you get loaded, man. Here you go. Yeah, man. Shout out to Ryan Wempy with that. What I forgot the name. Is it Wempy Gear or whatever? But he's got that Hot Yoga Samara shirt that he made for us. It's just oh man, Ryan Wempy's a great dude.
Scott, I got a question for you. I want to transition a little bit into the book without giving out all the details because hopefully more people get this book because it's just amazing. But I want to talk about give us a really your good news story, like one of the stories in there briefly that really touched you, that really made you feel good. And then give us one if you don't mind sharing it, just really, I know these are some hard questions, right? And and Scott, open up. This is what our show is about, this is.
Yeah. So I'll start with the one that the hardest part for me was, the low point in all of this was after we had, we had gotten Azam out, and I don't think I'm showing the football there because, he's in the United States now.
He's your neighbor.
He's my neighbor.
I love it.
We actually did a keynote together not too long ago, and he just took the microphone from me and talked for an hour. But anyway, the lowest point for me in this whole thing was when the level of suffering that so many of the Afghans were enduring over 72, 96 hours at a time out in that just human wave of death and destruction by Abbey Gate. And there was no food, there was no water. It was 104 degrees. They're trying to hold their children above the tear gas so that they don't suck in all those fumes, and there's flashbangs going off around them and people are getting trampled. And, this just goes on for not just hours, but for days. And, you're on the phone with a partner that you had served with who had just so loyally and faithfully, fought alongside you. And they're just saying, "Sir, they're beating my wife right now. Should I do something or what should I do?" And you're like, "Dude, I just need you to just keep it going. Just endure it. You're almost there, And he's like, "But sir, they're beating her." And you can hear it, and it's like, how much do you ask these people to endure? How much do you ask them to go through? And that was what was going through my mind towards the very end of this thing. And I'll be honest with you, man, it was the last period of darkness before the bomb went off. And I was just sitting in the darkness, just crying because it was like, I'm not the right guy to be doing this, man. I'm a 53-year-old storyteller. I'm not exactly the #1 draft pick for personnel extraction. And, these people are dying out here. A little 4-year-old girl had just gotten trampled, and we're trying to find a way to, get her to the hospital. And it's just like, what are we doing, man? What am I doing? I can't do this, and it was just this really, really dark period where I thought these people are actually getting killed because we're asking them to stay. And at that point, I just said, we're knocking it off. If they want to stay, they can stay. I can't do this. I can't be, I just can't keep asking them to endure this. And so everybody was in the chat room saying, my people are staying, my people are leaving, and a lot of people left, man. And I'm not kidding you. 5 minutes after I did that, it comes in the attention on the net. The conductor's back up. The Pineapple Express is running. And I don't know how many people couldn't get in because of that decision I made, and, I've made a lot of decisions in my life, man, that didn't go well. But that one, that one will haunt me the rest of my days, and, it was one of those things where it's just two bad choices. You know what I mean? It was just two bad choices. And, I made one of them. And then, you know, life happens on the back end of it. And, you know, I try not to beat myself up about it, but it still is there. You know, there's still people that are stuck over there. There are people I know for a fact who were executed after the bombing who were in the queue, and I took them out of the queue.
Wow.
And I tell you that because the last thing in the world I ever want to do is to come across as if I'm pointing fingers at General X or Admiral Y, because we all bear responsibility. I'm a commissioned officer, you know, and I bear responsibility for a lot of the stuff that happened in that war, to include some people not being around anymore. But that, for me, on top of everything else, like, was a serious low point that I still wrestle with very hard, even now.
No, well, I really appreciate you bringing that.
Yeah, Scott,
out.
Thank you for sharing.
And that's something that, you know, our audience, some people understand. A lot of people, like,
people are going to benefit from that.
People will benefit from that for sure, especially like leaders, you know. And we always talk about it, you know, business school, they never teach you about the fact that most likely your first 6 businesses will fail.
Yeah. So let me give you a high.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick.
And then to get to your high point, but like I just wanted for the audience watching, we've had a good audience today, comment and stuff like that, is if you really want the reins of leadership, like, you're going to make mistakes, right? Yeah. And you're going to, it's what you do after that makes you a leader, makes you a true patriot. But go to the high point, Scott. That one hit home, man.
And I'll throw a shout out to my old man. He's sitting here right now, just off camera, but he fought wildland fire for like 4 decades. And he taught me that very lesson, that you're going to make mistakes. People are going to get hurt, maybe killed. And you got to go sit on a stump for a few minutes and then get your ass back in the fight. Like, that's it. You know, that's all you can do. The high point. So there was a lady that we were evacuating, and her name was, and she's in the book, you'll see this. Her name was Hasina Safi. And Hasina was the Minister of Women's Affairs, right? She was one of 4 female ministers in Afghanistan, but she was the Minister of Women's Affairs. Like, she was the person who ushered in reform and change for women in Afghanistan. And so when the Taliban,
so she was already dealing with, that's already a dangerous thing in itself. Like,
women can't talk or teach. Your mouth.
The most wanted woman in
Iran right now.
Yeah, like the most wanted woman in Afghanistan by far. State Department's not evacuating her. USAID is not evacuating her. No one's helping her. So we start moving her through the Pineapple Express. Right. Hold on just a second, guys.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so guys, when you read this book, go get it. Go get Operation Pineapple Express. You're going to see exactly what we've said on this show before, where if you don't think what we were doing was just in Afghanistan, you should see how they treat women in Afghanistan. Right. And we just did a shirt for Fight Like a Woman in Iran. Like, you got no idea. All right. All you keyboard warriors got no idea what these women went through.
Dude, that shit in Iran is wow. While Scott's getting ready to do whatever he's got to do, but the videos that are floating around of just women getting, just literally groups of women just getting slaughtered, gunned down, you know, and they're standing up there in their country. They know they don't wear the hijab, and they're standing up and they know they're going to get killed.
So
they're doing it though. Like, talk about being strong, you know?
Yeah. Leading up to what Scott's talking about with his, his positive note here is how quick of a transformation women all of a sudden were allowed to make money. We're allowed to read. We're allowed to teach. And all of a sudden it's gone again, just like that. Right. And those promises that we made, and you had people that were, again, like Scott was saying, the most wanted woman in Afghanistan. So can you hear us, Scott? You still got us?
Yeah, I'm back, guys. Sorry
so we're right there. You're about to get the Minister of Women's Affairs out.
So the only way that she can move out is basically what Operation Pineapple Express consisted of was moving through the crowd and then into a sewage canal, an open sewage canal near Abbey Gate. Just this nasty open sewage canal that was like knee-deep sewage. And then there was a 4-foot hole in the fence that members of the White Devils, the Marines and the British paratroopers held it, but the White Devil, the company of White Devils that was right there, Captain Red Sunglasses and First Sergeant Kennedy, they were able to access that hole and come in and out of it. And they were allowed to do that. And so we had made contact with them. And so what would happen is you would go through the crowd, we would put you in the queue, and then we would pass that information over to the 82nd guys on a baseball card, just the same way that we targeted Taliban, ISIS on these baseball cards. We just reversed it. And then they would have that. They would have a green chem light around their neck. And then right time, right place, the Afghan commando and his family would drop into the canal. They would get to the green chem light. They would hold up a pineapple on their phone, exchange, challenge, and password, and then get pulled through the hole in the fence. Like that was the Pineapple Express. And we ran this thing for, 72 hours. Well, Hasina Safi, she's the Minister of Women's Affairs. She has no tactical training. She's on the run from the Taliban. She's got her full family in tow. And so they're moving through this crowd and they're going to go into the Pineapple Express, right? And so she has this fear of soldiers. And the reason that she has this fear of soldiers is because when she grew up in Afghanistan, the Russians had targeted her father and had almost killed him. And they were refugees in Pakistan her entire childhood. So she always harbored this immense fear of soldiers, to include NATO soldiers. And so when she was told by Congressman Waltz's staffer that she was going to have to drop into this canal and get pulled out by a soldier, she's freaking out more about that than going through a Taliban checkpoint, right? She is petrified. And so they get down in this canal, and now flip over to the guy on the soldier that's going to pull her out is a guy by the name of First Sergeant Jesse Kennedy. And Jesse Kennedy grew up in South Georgia. He was a farm boy, extremely poor. His dad died when he was really young. But just this salt of the earth dude that, like, when you read this book, you will see what an airborne NCO is supposed to be like. I mean, you guys will be so proud of him, because he just embodies what you guys lived, and he's so good. And he's just decent, like there's nothing flamboyant or flashy about him. He's just decent. And he's a warrior's warrior, but he's all about just doing the right thing. And anyway, so he's the guy at the fence when Hasina goes into the canal. And she said that she looked up and there's this big hulking figure. And he says, name, like that. And she made us to say Hasina Safi, and she's like, tears coming down her face, and she said that this big arm comes down and grabs her, pulls her out, and he says, my name's Jesse. You're safe now.
Oof, fucking awesome.
And he pulled her whole family. Yeah, he pulled her whole family in. And then he took them to the flight line. And he was off shift, and he sat with them all night at the flight line because she was going to the British embassy and she was waiting on the Brits to come pick her up. And because she was Jesse knew she was somebody important. He didn't know who, but he sat with her and her family the entire night. The Brits never showed. So he crossed over kind of the NATO line that you're not supposed to cross, went over to a British representative and said, this is Hasina Safi. They looked her name up and they were like, oh my God. Like,
we should have reacted to this a lot sooner. Yeah.
So they went and grabbed her family, bypassed processing. And as they're walking them to the plane, Jesse pulls off his American flag and gives it to her because it was all he had. And, and so I interviewed Hasina. I've interviewed her on my podcast. You guys should listen to it. It will break you.
Oh, we will.
But she talks about, she said, when I went into that canal, I had 5 brothers. And when I came out, I had 6. And yeah, they're still in touch to this day. They still talk to each other. And when I went to Fort Bragg to see the White Devils and give them books and thank them for what they did personally, for all the lives they saved, because they didn't know. They were asking Captain Red Sunglasses, did we get anybody? Like, did anybody really get out? And I'm like, you've got to be shitting me. So we went up there, and I actually got Hasina on a Zoom call or Skype call with the White Devils. and she was able to thank them and, personally from London and thank Jesse. And it was just one of the most impactful things I've ever seen. It was just incredible. But that was, to me, probably the most like poignant, eye-opening, encouraging, patriotic things I've ever seen. And it just reminded me who we are as Americans, and more importantly, who our NCOs and our enlisted guys are, because they are just magnificent, man. And these weren't SF guys. These were paratroopers, man. And the Marines did the same thing, and the JTACs. And it was really, really humbling to see that. But then to be able to tell their story was, and if I could just real quick.
Of course.
Same thing, Jesse and John, they got, when the bomb went off, they were, I won't give that away, they were right there doing triage. The White Devils were going through the fence, pulling people out when people were coming out of the fence.
America's Guard of Honor.
You can see it on the drone footage. You can see it. I watched, like, you can see it. But when the Marines got hit so hard, Jesse and John, when I was interviewing, they talked about how they raided the little shopette there on Kaya, and the only thing left were blueberry Pop-Tarts. And so they had like a pallet of blueberry Pop-Tarts that they ate the whole time they were on Kaya. Just it was like their only luxury, I guess. And on their way out, they had been pulled off the line after the Abbey Gate bomb, and they were going to be the guys to secure the final plane coming out on retrograde. So they were starting rehearsals for that. But on their way out, they stopped by the Marine company that had been hit so hard. And those guys were, out away from the rest of the formation, and they were obviously grieving heavily. And Jesse and his medic, Doc Lundy, grabbed a Hilux truck, and they drove over to the Marines, and they dropped off all of their med gear that they had remaining, and the remainder of the blueberry Pop-Tarts, and just spent a little time with those guys. And they didn't say anything. There wasn't any, but they just dropped off those Pop-Tarts and, did what warriors do, man. And I just, I just, everything about those guys, as I interviewed them and told their story, it was just so poignant and such a heavy reminder of the magnificent people that serve and the veterans. It's just, that was, for me, it reminded me that I think our best days are still in front of us, man, as long as we have people like that,
Man,
that was.
I think we talked about it before the show. We're like, we've had some people on it that have made us shut up. And Scott, you have definitely made us shut up listening to these stories, man. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah. So the little AAR, okay, well, the Foo Fighters are real. Okay, they're real aliens. Okay, and they help.
That's right. 80-20. Well, I think it was a 50-50 split between you and Scott.
Helped turn the tide of World War II, the Foo Fighters. But no, and then we got into the Pineapple Express with Scott Mann. And again, go get the book. I've already read it. It's phenomenal. And I can't wait for the play to go to PhoenixLastOutplay.com.
Yeah. We're in.
All right. Go watch the play. And if you have anybody that served, and again, don't forget about the Korean War vets and the Vietnam vets.
Right.
All right. Like, they have been forgotten about by this country. Okay. So reach out to them. Just spark a conversation with one of them. All right. Lead them to Veteran Trash Talk. All right. Yeah. And, that's where we tell our stories. And it happens on a daily basis on VTT Official. So that's our group. That's our support group. So if you go on VTT Official, you can talk story all day long. All right. And someone's gonna understand you. And so, Scott, again, I don't want to give away too much of the book. You guys got to read it. It's just absolutely phenomenal. And then, Bill came on and talked about being a leader, which he is a tried and true leader. And he talks about having to adapt, having to, make the changes necessary to reach the younger generations. And that's something that we have to do. And it's not just military. If you run a corporation, if you
that's
run
life.
If it's life, if you want to attract the 22-year-olds, to work for you, then maybe you need to make it, appealing to them. Yeah. All right. So
stop blaming them that's their way of thinking.
Yeah. And your dumbass policies that they're not coming into. But anyways, Scott, you get the last word before Dave closes us out. Give us all the plugs, all the links, and whatever you want to say. And then Dave will close us out.
I really enjoyed it, man. And I love what you guys are doing. And I hope we can stay connected because there's so much work to be done. If you want to follow my body of work, scottmann.com is probably the easiest way to do it. Everything about the play, it's like a link tree there. So everything, the play, the book, and just the nonprofit story work that we're doing, scottmann.com. And if you want to just go straight to the play, though, lastoutplay.com, you can go there and get the tour stops and all that. I would just say what I would end on is I do believe we're on the front end of a potential veteran health, mental health tsunami. I think that what particularly our post 9/11 population is going through right now. There's a lot of recent studies out that says things like 3 out of 5 veterans feel like a stranger in their own country. 73% of the post 9/11 population feels betrayed by the Afghan withdrawal. 67% feel humiliated. When you start combining that with the suicide, alcoholism numbers that we have, it's a nasty cocktail. And we've got to talk about it. We can't just bury it. We can't pretend like it's going to go away. And frankly, it's going to require, in my opinion, the cooperation of the active duty component, the senior officers from the Pentagon, politicians, but it's also going to require, former generals, former sergeants major, as well as, what you guys are doing and what we're doing, like at a grassroots level. It's going to take all of us. This is a massive thing. And if we want to get in front of this, we're going to have to do it. And there are things that we can do. For example, helping resettle our Afghan allies. I mean, 2/3 of veterans say that would really help their mental health if that was to be done. If we, but then we just had Congress pull it from the Afghan Adjustment Act. So, it's so I think we have to tell the story. We have to push for accountability, not because we're looking for blame, but warriors and war fighters want to know that what happened in Afghanistan is not going to happen to our kids. Or, you want to talk about recruiting and retention. Most of the recruits come from military families. And guess what military families are telling their kids right now? Don't do it.
Don't do it.
Don't join. Because
senior leaders were telling me to get out when I had 18 years in.
Yeah. So we've really got to come to terms with what happened in the Afghanistan withdrawal and the post 9/11 conflict, not in a victimhood kind of way, but in a way that we recognize moral injury for what it is. It's compromising one's values in a way that is detrimental to your soul. And we have to address that because all the work on PTS, TBI is not going to matter if we let this moral injury go untended. Not to mention our national security is shit right now because, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are reconstituting in Afghanistan. So there's just a whole lot about this, guys, that I think we got to keep talking about. We got to keep it in the forefront, and we got to reach out to our buddies and look them in the eyes and talk to them and intervene wherever we can.
Boom.
Wow. Yeah, I don't really have much to say anymore. I'm blown away, Scott. Thank you so much for coming on. I mean, just the stories you were sharing. I saw you get emotional a couple times, but that's what this community is all about. We share our stories, and at the end of the show, we all feel great about ourselves, right? Because we all shared it amongst our brothers, and then we're pushing out to our community. So for anybody that missed the episode or just tuned in late, go to veterantrashtalk.com. Go check it out again on YouTube. We love you guys, and we'll see you guys next Saturday. We're out. Scott, you can stay on.